Favorite way to set up shoot and no shoot targets inside the house, how often you put them up versus just shoot. So when you're first training people, this is kind of something that we do to highlight sectors of fire where it's all shoot targets. And we want the marksmanship to be very easy until people get the fundamentals down. And then we'll start putting no shoot targets in. And then it's like every single run includes no shoot targets. The way that we set those up, at times we may use the no shoot and shoot targets to slow people down so that, we're not creating unsafe conditions within a room. But that's a much longer conversation. I would say pretty much every room that we go into now, well, let me take that back. Probably 50% of the rooms that we set up for runs with a team who already has their sectors of fire down, we'll have hostages in it. And then if it's a specific, maybe it's an intelligence-driven training mission where we only have 3 no-shoot targets that are briefed in the intelligence brief, obviously we're only going to put 3 in that. It's a great tool. And then it's another way if you're trying to slow a team down during training and you're forcing them to process targets before they leave the room, no-shoot targets is a great way to slow the team down so they can catch their breath if they're getting a little bit overwhelmed with speed. So it's a really great tool. And maybe I'll post a video on how we set up targets for training purpose and also to highlight certain things inside the ShootHouse. That would be a good video to throw up.
When you go to force on force, do you see a difference in training when it goes from dry runs in the house to live fire runs in the house to sims on paper and then sims on people? Are they the same? Like, are you going to treat shooting a no shoot sims on paper the same as you treat a no shoot sims on live force on force? So how should it be handled in training, or how would you recommend people view it in training?
So we treat simunitions as if they're live. And so the takeaway is me shooting a no shoot with a live round is the same as me shooting a no shoot with a sims round on paper, and the same for force on force. With that being said, if it's a team that's very proficient, we may set up super complicated scenarios for them with force on force to drive home certain points. So we may actually push them to the point of failure. So think about the way that you train with a pistol. If you stay at that constant safe speed where you're able to shoot, A's at 7 yards, and you're never really pushing the speed, you're never going to get any faster, and you're never really going to learn anything else. You're never going to progress. So with that, we have to have an honest conversation with the team of where they're at, and then the understanding that we may push it past your capability. Once you understand that, like for this one run, we're not telling you to shoot no shoots, but it is going to be a very complicated scenario. So that is different than if we're just doing a very basic force on force and guys are shooting no shoots. And so it's not our place. We try to set up training, we do set up training that's realistic. And we do not typically put in any trickery. There's a difference in complicated and progressing skill and trickery. We don't do any of the trickery stuff. So there's never anything where we're baiting anyone to take a bad shot. And that's something that we're really very, very deliberate about, the way that the scenarios are set up in the role player briefs that we give during force on force. So it's not our place to give advice on what to do for people who may have multiple no shoots. But what I will say is that it's a whole man concept. It depends on the scenario, and it's definitely case by case. And if it becomes a pattern, then that's something that the department itself will have to address with the individual. But what I will say is that we have very few no shoots shot during force on force. I can only think of a few over 5 years. So it's actually like the amount of thought and care put into discrimination before shooting with the law enforcement that we work with has been top notch. And with the understanding also that our course is built in, a progressive manner where it brings people up to speed before we put them in those bad scenarios. So where you'll see issues is where you jump straight from we're either rusty or we're not properly trained and we go into a complicated force on force scenario. That's where you're setting people up for failure. And that's more, in my opinion, on the person setting it up and the leadership not understanding what they're putting their guys into. Now the onus still always lies on the person who took the shot. But in my opinion, that is more on the person setting up the backside than it is the individual.
I think that's hugely important to me, that guys are getting training like that. Because I think you have to have an honest conversation, saying if you're going to be a SWAT team, if you're going to perform this mission, we need you to end up here. You do need to be able to get to at least here. We're not going to present you with anything that's unwinnable, that's just so out of the norm crazy. But understand that absolute insanity does happen. There are complicated scenarios that you're going to run into. And if you can have the mental patience to discriminate force on force, force on paper, and then take that to live, well, some people may say like, well, live is scarier. No, but it shouldn't be. Like if you can, this is how we do it. This is what you're going to do. It will only be as good as it ever possibly can be. If you do what's expected of you, if you can win, you'll win. If it isn't winnable, you're not going to win. And doing something faster or worse will generally only make it worse. Is that fair to say? Like if you can do this force on force, you can do it live. Just don't change anything. Do what's expected of you.
Yeah. And so, you know, there is a tendency when guys go from force on paper to force on force for them to speed up, and the fundamentals usually suffer. And so we understand that, and we will slow people down during the training runs to get them back to the right speed. And the best way to do that is to be like, hey, slow your feet down and focus on your shots. And if you can give that simple cue, typically it gets guys back into the right gear. And focusing on the shots is something that we use for live, something that we use for force on target. And then for force on force, it gets people right in the back in the right speed. So there's a little bit of responsibility on the trainer and the person walking behind the team to keep them at the right speed.
And I think it was a big debate on our team when we're getting shot, when all these things are happening in reality, right? Does that mean you did anything wrong? Or even
no.
Because you got shot, did you do something wrong?
No.
No.
Well, typically no. You know, there's a common thought that, you know, CQB is this magical thing where if you do it absolutely properly and everyone hits their points of domination, then no one's going to get hurt. It's like, it doesn't really work that way. We're stacking the odds in our favor as much as we can, but, you know, things happen, and it's a dangerous sport, and people are going to get injured. And so, you know, that's not necessarily a measure of you doing things right and wrong. That's just the way the situation plays out.
Yeah. I hope dudes can take that even from this video or from the training you get, that because what I see is when it goes to force on force and people get hit, we have to change what we're doing. No, you just got hit. Like, you're doing it right. This is the best way it can be done. You just got hit. Ducking, dodging, doing that stuff isn't going to help anything. You know, Matt, are you being shot at right now? Yeah. Are you hit? No. Then keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And that should be, you know, if you look at like the ratio of how many people get shot on, say, you know, just a normal force on force run, that you can use that as kind of a risk assessment for how you want to do a target. You know, the last resort, in my opinion, is running in a room. If we can use time or tools or anything other than putting a body in that's what I'm going to do. The situation's a little bit different during an active shooter scenario, and so the risk goes up, and we're willing to assume more to stop what's happening. But even in that, like, just to kind of go back and capture what we said before, like, even if you do it perfect, bad things are still probably going to happen. And that's just kind of how it is.